And welcome back. This is our Wheel of Time episode 7 and 8 reaction and analysis video. Quick touch on spoilers, my spoiler policy real quick. This channel is full spoilers for the show and novels. I try to stay away from hard spoilers like naming Dark Friends or talking too much about the Age of Legends. However, there are some pretty big spoilers in this episode, so I did want to warn people because the last thing I want to do is spoil anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled, and you probably shouldn't be watching this video if you don't want to be spoiled. But I'm going to try to be careful, and before we get into any big spoilers, I will mention again. Secondly, this will be the last reaction and analysis episode video for this season. And after this is done, sometime in the next week or so, I'll do one more video sort of wrapping up season 1, my thoughts on season 1 overall, and what I've learned making these videos and what my plans are going forward. So with that, we got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get into these two episodes. I thought they were really good. I really enjoyed them. There were some good moments. There were some okay moments. There were some things I liked. There were some things I didn't like. But overall, positive reaction to these episodes. Like every episode of the season, it has started out with a very strong trailer of something that has happened elsewhere in the Wheel of Time world. And this is the Blood Snow. This is happening, the Battle of Shining Walls. The Aiel crossed the Dragon Wall to kill the king of Karhine for cutting down the sapling of the World Tree that the Aiel gave to the Karhinian. They're fighting the armies of the West, and it's where Tigraine, who you see here, gives birth to Rand, the Dragon Reborn, on the slopes of Dragonmount, where Tam Althor finds the baby in the snow and brings him back to the Two Rivers. Meanwhile, in the White Tower, the Keeper of the Chronicles, Katara Moroso, gives the prophecy or the foretelling that the dragon has been reborn, while Siuan and Moraine are attending the Aes Sedai Amyrlin seat. And so they hear about it. And I think it's Tamara Ospenya is the Amyrlin seat. And she sends Moraine and Siuan out on the quest to find the Dragon Reborn and bring it back to the White Tower. So, this scene of a pregnant woman full-term pregnant woman kicking the crap out of a bunch of armored knights, ninja style, was a little far-fetched, not going to lie. However, in the books, Tigraine is a maiden of the spear, and she is at this battle full-term pregnant. And the Aiel apparently have no problem bringing pregnant women into the battle. I don't think it's the most strategic choice for infantry. However, it's important to the story. A maiden of the spear in universe is more than a match for 2 or 3 warriors from the Westlands. The Aiel are terrifyingly good fighters. However, and Robert Jordan does mention this in A New Spring, there's a scene in The New Spring where Lan is attacked, I think, by Dark Friends. And there's even a line that, only in the stories does one man face 6. And Lan is able to fight off his attackers, but I think he survives, although he might be badly wounded. It's been a long time since I read A New Spring, but I thought that scene was worth mentioning because just it is a little far fetched that she's doing somersaults and backflips and taking on, armored knights while full. I mean, even if she wasn't pregnant, she kills 5 or 6 full-grown men in this scene with ease. So, although I guess one of them does stab her, and I love that they do the thing in movies where, she's stabbed in the side with a dagger, and then she pulls the dagger out. If you're ever stabbed in the belly with a knife, you will not be pulling the knife out and remaining conscious, or not pulling your intestines out with it. That's not knives. When knives go in you, they don't just come out and then I just have to deal with the fact that I have a wound now. Don't ever pull a knife out if you ever stabbed in the gut. Just that's one. If you take anything away from this channel, take that lesson away. But I enjoyed it. It was fun action. There was a lot of good action and adventure in these 2 episodes, and that's what we're tuning in to this series for. So I'm glad that's what they're giving us. This is Tigraine. So spoiler here for Rand's mother. Tigraine is a noblewoman from Andor. She's the daughter heir, and she is told by an Aes Sedai, I think it's Katara Moroso, that she has to go to live with the Aiel in order to save the world. I went through it in another video. She has to go to join the Aiel to either save the world or something about the Dragon Reborn. I don't think she mentions Dragon Reborn. I'd have to look it up. Anyway, and so she leaves Andor, joins the Maidens, marries Janduin. He is the clan chief of the Tarad Aiel. I think that's right. Or at least, maybe she doesn't marry him. I apologize that I don't know this. This part of the story is told in different chunks all over the entire series, because when a maiden gets pregnant or a maiden has a child, she gives the child up. They take the child from her, and the child is raised elsewhere, and she doesn't know who the child is, because maidens don't get married; they wed the spear. So I would say that Janduin and Tigraine aren't married. Maybe they are. Read the books; they're great books. But they are both with the Aiel armies during the Aiel War. Janduin dies during the Aiel War. I do know that. No. Oh, no. Janduin goes to the Blight. She dies. Janduin is so grief-stricken that he, I believe, takes some of his warriors and goes to the Blight to hunt the Dark One, and then he's killed by Slayer. Won't talk about Slayer just yet. I don't think Slayer's like a book 3 or 4 character. Which Slayer looks like Rand for reasons that I won't get into, and that's one of the reasons why Janduin hesitates to kill Slayer, is because Rand looks like his mother. But that's a whole nother. We're a few seasons away from that. She's a redhead, which leads me to believe they've said that Aiel are gingers this whole season, and here we meet Tigraine as a ginger. Well, Tigraine's not an Aiel; she's from Andor. So, bit of a continuity bust here. I mean, there are redheads west of the Dragon Wall, and they're not ready to go into the full backstory of Rand's parents just yet. So it is what it is. I thought this actress did a great job. She this is what, you know, I would this is what I would expect out of a Maiden of the Spear. I love that we got to see the blood snow. The outfits look great. The scenery looks great, and we meet Tam. Tam comes and holds the heroin mark blade at her throat. Sorry if if the backstory of Rand's parents was a little messed up there. Like I said, there's a lot to tell there, and it's told in different pieces. And I'm trying to do this video unscripted from memory. So apologies. Anyway, moving on. Great look for Tam here. I particularly like that he's got the bees from Ilion on his breastplate, because that's the army that Tam serves with during the Aiel War. I think he also fights in the White Cloak War too. But just a great look to the armor here. Glad they're using the proper heraldry. We get a little bit more about the Heron Mark blade in this episode, or either in this episode or the next episode. Like I said, we've gotten a lot of great trailers for all of these episodes, and it's been one of my favorite parts of season 1, has been watching all these trailers. And we'll talk a little bit more about this scene, because they do the second half of this scene, I believe, later in this episode or the next episode. So we're in the Ways, and, you know, we could have spent an entire episode in the Ways. Again, I hope that the producers of Wheel of Time, or the studio, gives this show more episodes in season 2 and season 3, because there's a lot of storytelling that's available here. And I do feel like we kind of rushed through the Ways. I think we're in the Ways for about 5 minutes in this episode. And, you know, that was kind of disappointing, because a lot happens in the Ways. There's a lot of exposition in the Ways, and it's a great location. Sort of gives you a little bit more of an idea of just how much depth there is in this world and how many different set pieces we have to visit. I did enjoy the sort of Lord of the Rings, Mines of Moria look. That's definitely where, you know, some of the ideas behind the journey through the Ways came from. Wheel of Time borrows a lot from Lord of the Rings, and expands on it and does a great job of it. And I'm fine with that sort of creative appropriation, as long as it's not a ripoff, and I don't feel like it is in this case. But, you know, this again, action and adventure is what we're here for, and this is certainly a location that you can have a lot of adventure in. There's a lot of mystery here. There's this big monster called Manon Shin that we don't quite know what it is. Of course, Moraine doesn't tell us. Hey, Moraine, what's Manon Shin? Well, just don't listen to it. Like, we could use some more information than that. But anyway, great scenery, great set piece. Wish we had spent a little more time in the Ways. Manon Shin shows up, and Nynaeve saves the day. Again, just has all the badass channeling abilities whenever she needs them. Hasn't had any training, can just sort of snap her fingers and cast the spell that you need to defeat this undefeatable, implacable evil. Convenient, good for the story. Manon Shin does whisper into their ears, and it doesn't do the, blood so sweet. In the books, Manon Shin is very gory. That's what it said. It's, basically I want to eat you and do disgusting things to your corpse. In the series, it's kind of playing on the worst fears of the characters. And then they're out of the ways and on to Fal Dara. And as I was doing a little research for this video, I came across this line on WhatFandom.com from The World of the Wheel of Time, the Big Book of Bad Art. A single rose placed just so instead of a garden. The simple fortress of Fal Dara in place of the city of Mafal Dadaranel. Mafal Dadaranel. Which I thought was kind of poetic. And this is definitely a city of poetry, a city of war, but also a city of poetry. I think there's a scene in the books where Aljamar and Lan share a poem, or one of them sort of composes a poem on the spot. The idea that samurai will often compose a haiku or a death poem before going into battle. Robert Jordan was definitely very much aware of that and weaves it into his storytelling. And I think we see a little bit of sort of the poetry and pageantry of battle. I'll talk a little bit more about battle once we get to Tarwin's Gap, which I do like that, we're in Fal Dara and there is Tarwin's Gap, and it's hard to complain as a Wheel of Time fan when they show you pretty much exactly what I think it would look like. Although I do think Tarwin's Gap is a little further away. I don't think Fal Dara is right at Tarwin's Gap. But for the sake of the show, here we are. They do a great job, like with the bees earlier on Tam's breastplate. We have the black hawk of Shiniar set against a blue and white field, which is the heraldry of Shiniar, and then we'll see Lord Aljamar's his symbol is 3 foxes. Talk a little bit about Lord Aljamar. Actually, I think we're about to meet him. One of those. Excuse me. Yeah, Lord Aljamar. So I wasn't too in love with the depiction of Lord Aljamar and his sister. Their plot, their arc seems to be, or Aljamar's arc in this episode seems to be, I don't need any help from the White Tower. I've got everything under control here. And then by the end of the arc, he's like, oh man, I should have asked for help because we're actually fucked. And the sister, she's the voice of reason. And then at the end, she kind of, she goes the opposite. She's like, solid here. Here's all the right things we need to do. And then during the fight at Tarwin's Gap, she channels too much and gets people killed. Aljamar is a great captain. He's one of the best warriors in this world. I expected a less flawed character when they introduced him. I think there's maybe the King of Shiniar could have been in this role, as sort of the idea of the leader not wanting to accept help from the party. That's a trope you see a lot in storytelling. There's no one else to do it, so it has to be with Aljamar. I just really like the 5 captains, and I like this character, and I don't want to see him. I guess I didn't want to see him as anything other than a total badass. But that's my own personal takeaway. Look how great this throne room looks, though. I mean, you got the banners, you got that really ornate throne. There's Uno. I looked up this other guard that has a couple of lines in the episode. That is not Ingtar. He's got a name similar to Ingtar, but it is not Ingtar, who's an important Shinarian character that we meet in the second book. I think they did a great job visually with the setting of Shiniar. The The culture is a little bit different than what I would have expected. There's some gender stuff. There's a lot of gender stuff in both of these episodes, which is fine. But they specifically the warrior, the men ride out to fight the Trollocs, and then the women guard the city, which happens in history. A lot of cultures leave shield maidens behind to protect home and hearth while the men ride out in war. But because of the ability of women to be able to channel in the Wheel of Time world, women hold a little bit more power than in our world. I did think that the performance of the actress playing Algemar's sister was a little over the top. I'll talk about that in a couple of when we get to some of her scenes. Let's keep going. Padan Fain shows up, which he does in the books. He's here to cause trouble. We meet Min. And she looks just like, I think, she looks like what I've always imagined Min looks like. I would have liked her to flirt a little bit more with Rand, but this is a very serious series. We live in serious times. There's, no room for levity or flirtation. It's all got, there's a lot of angst in this series, and there's a lot of angst in our media right now. A little more color too. I mean, everything's very brown in Shinyar. I guess they're, living out in the desert, but I don't know if you've ever been to the Southwest. There's a lot of color. Just because you live in a desert doesn't, usually, you do a lot of decorative, when the landscape is so brown to sort of bring the life out. And if I recall correctly, the exterior of Shinyar is very utilitarian because it is a fortress, but when you get inside, it's very bright, and they have a lot of gardens, and that's explained to Rand and friends that we might, just because we live in a fortress city, we still want to have be surrounded by life and beauty. I think that's Shinyar and Fal Dara. I could be thinking of another fantasy setting, and if I apologize if I am. But anyway, we meet Min. She tells us, Moiraine knows who she is. She's a seer. She's a doom seer. She can see everybody's fate. She gets visions. It's funny. Moiraine tells her, she has an exchange with Moiraine. She's like, you didn't tell him what I was, did you? And Moiraine is like, no, only the Aes Sedai know that. She's good. I'm glad you're keeping it a secret. But then in another scene, Rand and Perrin and Egwene and Nynaeve show up, and she's just like, oh yeah, I'll tell you. It's no problem that you know what I am. So she doesn't see. There are some inconsistencies with this show for the sake of moving the plot along. Whatever. What else? Yeah, this angst. So Perrin's arc in this episode is that he's in love with Egwene and jealous of Rand, and then they wrap that arc up in this episode. In the books, there is Perrin and Egwene are close, and I think there is some dialogue while they're either with the White Cloaks or the Tinkers, where Perrin admits that he does have feelings for Egwene, but understands that it can't happen because she's in love with Rand. I think they allude to that. They're very close. They're like a brother and sister. So this isn't too much of a problem, but I feel like this episode didn't really have too much of a plot. I felt like it was more. They filled in a lot of stuff. They gave us Min. They gave us. I I think later in this episode, Rand remembers the conversation, or remembers Tam having the dream where he reveals that he isn't Rand's father, which they left. I remember not liking that it wasn't in the first episode, because that's such an important plot point that I'm glad it's in this episode. Like I said, they give us a lot. They give us more about the Heron Mark sword. They give us a lot of stuff that had been left out, that I had noticed that it was omitted when I was watching those episodes, and so I'm glad that they're putting those pieces back into place. But it's at the expense of this episode having, a first act, a second act, and a third act. It just kind of, here's everything that we missed that you need to know so that we can get to the finale. And so this is an illusion of story. This isn't really a story, because they wrap it up by the end of the episode. And I was thinking about it. I don't know how much time Egwene and Perrin spend together after the Dragon Reborn. Because Rand goes to the Aiel Waste, and Perrin goes back to the Two Rivers. Egwene goes with Rand. They spend a lot of, Perrin might go too, but they send Perrin back to the Two Rivers at some point after the Dragon Reborn. And then I do not think that Perrin and Egwene meet again until the last battle. And I don't want to go through each one of their story points, but the reason I bring that up is I don't think we're going to see much more of Perrin loves Egwene, but he knows he can't have her. I really feel like that was just, they dumped that in our lap this episode and wrapped it up, and we're going to move on. Again, we're getting good performances out of the Emond's Fields 5. However, I wish they would cheer up a little bit. Nynaeve in particular is just, after being kind of, Nynaeve is not comic relief by any means in the book, but she's kind of mopey in these last two episodes. I'd rather at least see her a little pissed off. That's what when I think about Nynaeve. But again, dark times, cynical media, what can I say? She follows Lan to some Shannarian friends. This is the armsman who basically raised Lan, rescued him from the fall of Malkiri. I think it was like 20 sworn men that carried baby Lan while the rest of his family were killed. Got that backstory, I think, in this episode. He's wearing the Hadori. His wife has the Kasan. She's got the red Kasan on her forehead. I believe that it's white. The Malkiri women wear a white Kasan on their forehead until they're married, and then it goes red. So nice touch. Again, they're getting the heraldry right, and they're touching on the different cultures of this world. But again, I believe this should be bright. The interiors maybe should be brighter colored. I really think that's Shinyar. I hope that's not some other fantasy setting that I'm getting confused. Nynaeve and Lan hook up. It's funny, there is a little bit of a role reversal where Nynaeve comes into Lan's bedroom and says, "Do you want me to leave?" And then after they sleep together, Nynaeve gets up and dresses while Lan is in bed. And in classic cinema, it's usually the guy that is pursuing the booty call, and then the first one to leave after the deed is done. You guys were thinking when you wrote this scene, and I don't know if it's the next scene, but she's frowning again after. You'd think, was Lan that bad in bed? It's interesting too because in a New Spring we find a little bit more about Rand's sex life. There isn't a lot of sex in Wheel of Time, but there is sex, and I just thought it was a nice touch in an episode that we're learning about Lan's backstory. They deal with the sexuality of the character. Oftentimes characters in stories and television have no bodily functions. They don't fuck. They don't go to the bathroom. Watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, for example. And everybody's fucking in this episode. And I apologize for the language. Rand and Egwene hook up. And Rand has been going back and forth this entire season, whether he's okay with the fact that Egwene has a destiny besides being his wife. And it actually becomes central to his encounter with Balazaman at the end of the 8th episode. For whatever reason, this character, the actor who's playing Rand, reminds me of Anakin Skywalker, and it's a similar character. I think he's doing a better job than maybe Hayden Christensen did in the prequels. Although I don't really want to go into a Star Wars thing here. But again, I just wish everybody wasn't crying all the time. But maybe they'll lighten things up. They kill Loyal in the next episode, and it's like he was the one guy that would lighten the mood. He's got a great line when we get to. I've got the screenshot, but he's got a great line in the next episode. And then Rand figures it out. What a twist. After all the, red herrings and false reveals that maybe it's going to be Egwene, maybe it's going to be all 5 of them are dragons. Nope, it's the main character, and the same character in the books. So, and this is when we get Rand carrying Tam through the woods on winter night, and Tam has his fever dream where he reveals that he's not Rand's father. We see a bunch of flashbacks. There's a bunch of great montages in both of these episodes. They definitely, again, lots of good action adventure, lots of great montages, good storytelling throughout, lots of exposition, putting pieces in place that we need to get to the end of the Eye of the World and sort of wrap up all the arcs. We see all the different times that Rand has channeled, which, if you read the Eye of the World, happens. It happens at different points in the Eye of the World than it did in this series. However, I'm glad that we got those moments summed up here when the Trolloc attacked them in the ways earlier in this episode and was knocked off the ways by the One Power. I remember wondering, well, who did that? Because they said don't use the One Power in the ways. And then Egwene immediately said, I didn't mean to channel, because she thought she did it, but it turned out it was Rand who did it. When he knocked on the door, when he was escaping the Dark Friend, I think in episode 3, when he deflected the Midril through, that might have thrown a dagger or the ruby dagger at him, and he used the One Power to deflect it. So Rand's the Dragon Reborn. He knows it. Min confirms it. They've got, and also Min mentions that she's going to see him rainbows and carnivals and three beautiful women. So, that's setting the table for Rand's romances. Rainbows, I would have to say the Aes Sedai. I'm trying to think where else rainbows show up in the Wheel of Time as a symbol. Mainly the Aes Sedai. Carnivals. Well, I would expect that we're going to see Tom again in season 2, and Rand's going to spend some time maybe apprentice to Tom, because Rand has got to learn to play the flute at some point. I'm not watching the show unless Rand plays a little flute for us. So with Tom's his Gleeman's cloak with all the patches, that could be the rainbow, and maybe they're going to go to different carnivals as a Gleeman and as apprentice in season 2. That's my quick takeaway from that. I could be wrong. But we also get the mention of three beautiful women and no real indication from Min that she knows she's one of them. But there is a scene when Min leaves the city where she's kind of looking back on the city, and she has sort of a longing in her eyes. So maybe. I did enjoy the scene where at the trailer where, we're into the scene where, it's not the trailer, it's the second half of the trailer, where Tam helps Tigraine give birth to Rand, and then takes, and just the way the actress's expression softened when Tam put down a sword and held her hand, I thought was a nice touch. I love my Ilian bees, man. Love them. So Rand goes and finds Moiraine, says, I'm the one, and they head out alone. I'm the Dragon Reborn. They head out alone into the Blight. And we see the first representation of the Blight. And it looks very blighty. I mean, I didn't really think of it as a jungle of corrupt vegetation. I've always thought of it as kind of a wasteland without a lot of vegetation. But I think we get a description that the plants are definitely pretty nasty. So, the idea that this contagion has sort of taken over this part of the world and is growing is right out of the books. And they're headed into the Blight, and we'll pick it up in the next episode. That's it for episode 7. And now we're diving into episode 8 and the finale. The trailer takes place between Lews Therin Telamon, and I looked her up, but then I closed the window that I had her. She's from a strike at Shaloil Gull. She is the leader of the female Aes Sedai. This is Latra Pose Dekum. And he calls her the Tamerlane seat with a T. And I think that seems to indicate that the Ring of Tamerlane is a mythical ring from the Age of Legends that actually the dragon wears. And it's been corrupted. The name has been corrupted, and so that the modern Aes Sedai the modern female Aes Sedai are calling their leader the Amyrlin seat. They speak entirely in the old tongue in this episode, and I just had this idea. I did like that the actor they cast as Luz Theron looks a little bit like Barack Obama, and Latra is in the white pantsuit. So I did sort of have this idea of this is Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton sort of, with planning with the best intentions on how to save the world and accidentally destroying it. Well, maybe Hillary Clinton didn't have the best intentions, but I think Barack did. And he just doesn't he look like Barack Obama? I don't know. I thought it was an interesting choice. This was a good scene at the final of 8 great trailers for each of these episodes, and a little bit of a peek back into what the Age of Legends was like, which we have not gotten in this series because we did not get the Dragon Mount prelude, prologue, excuse me, shot. And I actually, when they flashed back to 3,000 years earlier to start this episode, I was like, oh my God, they're just gonna put the Winter Dragon. We're gonna get Billy Zane. We're not. We didn't get Billy Zane. And instead, we got Barack and Hillary. And then we get a shot of what the Age of Legends actually looked like. And I'm gonna spend a little time because I just grabbed the screenshot real quick and I didn't take a look at it. The architecture seems to suggest a little bit of what Tar Valon would eventually become. There's a research center. This is, I'm assuming, Paradis, which is the capital city of the Age of Legends, where all the Aes Sedai are. There's a research facility where Lanfear operates called the Colon Dom, which could be at the center. I believe the Dark Ones. Somebody who knows a little bit more about the Wheel of Time, and for as much as I've read these books, a lot of what happens escapes me. I don't want to go too much, so a little bit of spoilers for Age of Legends. What happens is they accidentally set the Dark One free or partially free. Lanfear is looking for a new power source, and there's this big white egg that I forget what they call it, that she figures out if she mines this egg, then she can tap into this new power source that we find out is, I think they call it the true source. It's the Dark One. And as soon as she opens it up, this black beam of darkness shoots out and the egg shatters. And the war, the shadow begins. And it ends when Luz Theron Telamon and the 100 companions imprison the Dark One at Shaloil Ghul. The Dark One does the counterstroke, taints the male half of the true source, and drives all the male Aes Sedai insane. Latra and the female Aes Sedai want to use these two powerful sa'angreals instead. And I might do an entire video on the strike at Shaloil Ghul, because I've only read that once or twice, and I've been reading a little bit of it as research for this video. So I think I'll stop it there with this trailer and get into the final episode, because we're 45 minutes into this video and I wanted to do it under an hour. That's not going to happen. So Perrin and Egwene are fine, you guys. Perrin's over the fact that he's always loved her and can never have her. Hey, look, they're smiling. That's the first time. Actually, there are more smiles in this episode than there were in the last one. Everyone was very grouchy, but now that we got through all that angst, everybody's friends again. We get the back in the Blight with Moiraine and Rand. We get the Seven Towers of Malkir. I think she says they were abandoned 40 years ago, so I would put Land's age at around 40. That sounds about right. I believe Aes Sedai can extend the life of their warders a little bit through the bond. Rand and Moiraine have kind of teamed up, and they're on the main mission here. Rand is coming to terms with the fact that he's the Dragon Reborn. Moiraine is coming to terms with the fact that her quest is almost at an end and she might die at the end of it. We wrap up Nynaeve and Lan's arc. Lan is very poetic here. He, explains to her that he can't be her warder or her husband. He'll hate the man that she chooses, but he'll love him if he makes her smile. He calls her beautiful. It's just a touching scene. I think these two had a pretty good romance in this first season. Certainly earlier than the romance in the books. I don't know how much chemistry the two of them had as people. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more animation out of Nynaeve, especially in these last two episodes. She seems like she played it very muted, kind of downcast. Lan was great. And we meet Balazaman, the man behind the mask. And it's not Billy Zane. And and I was when he shot the arrow in Balazaman's face and Balazaman took off the mask, I was just like, please, please, please let it be Billy Zane. But it wasn't Billy Zane. Instead, it's this actor, Fariz, who's great. He was in Rogue One. He was in a bunch of other stuff. Zero Dark 30. All right, spoilers through the Dragon Reborn here. This is Ishamael. Ishamael was only partially bound when Lews Therin imprisoned the Dark One. He can touch the world and move around the world every 1,000 years, and he's done so. He did it 1,000 years after the breaking during the Trolloc Wars. He did it 2,000 years after the breaking during the wars of Arthur Hawkwing, and he's doing it now, 3,000 years after the breaking. The reason he is the general of the Shadow. All the rest of the Forsaken are bound, although they've recently been released. The Dark One is still bound. Ishamael gives the orders to the armies and operatives of the Shadow. He is in charge of the Dark Friends. He's in charge of the Black Aja. Let me put a pin in that. He's in charge of the Dark Friends. Masana's in charge of the Black Aja. But she answers to Ishamael. And the Trollocs think he is the Dark One. He goes by, their name for him is Balazaman. He never bothers to clarify that he isn't the Dark One, is my point. But he isn't the Dark One. He's the Dark One's chief servant, Ishamael. And I should talk a little bit more about Ishamael since he's here. And this is the first time we've had a Forsaken actually on screen. Elan Morin Tedranai, who is in the prologue to Eye of the World. He's the one that tells Lews Therin Telamon he's gone insane and gives him a moment of clarity through healing so that Lews can see what he's actually done. They call him the Betrayer of Hope. He was a philosopher during the Age of Legends and figured out that the Dark One and the dragon are destined to battle over and over and over. Visit wattfandom.com and read up on Ishmael. It's a good read. Gives a lot of background to the character. Very complex character who evolves throughout the series and plays a crucial role in the climax to both the series and the Dragon Reborn. He's the one that's been appearing in everyone's dreams. He isn't the main antagonist that we meet at the Eye of the World in the book The Eye of the World. It's two other Forsaken, Agenor and Belathamal. This is actually this episode felt like it drew a little bit from A Memory of Light, the final book in the series. And there will be some spoilers for The Memory of Light. And there'll be one big spoiler, and I'll call it out before I get to it. I love the black coat and the white shirt underneath, which is sort of suggests an Ashaman, or definitely dressed more in dressed how a powerful man of our world would be dressed. This is a guy that lived in the Age of Legends. He's not dressed like a medieval farmer like Rand is. I think that's a nice touch. He's got a great face for a bad guy. So if I couldn't get Billy Zane, I'm glad we got this guy. I think he does a great job. He has a little bit of humor in his role. He's like, come on, have a seat, and actually several of these huge confrontations are just conversations between Ishmael and Rand. And so the fact that they just chose to end season 1 with a conversation between Ishmael and Rand is somebody in the writer's room has read these books and understands Wheel of Time, definitely understands it better than I do, which I've been saying all along. The series is in good hands. And while I don't agree with every choice they're making and every moment of the show, I would say it's good enough for me. I would like to point out that in one of my earlier videos, when Moraine was suiting up, I think it was the Moraine's Quest video, she pulled out this Angreal, and I was like, I bet that's the little fat man. And somebody on Reddit said, no, it isn't the little fat man. Well, it turns out it is the little fat man. So I'll just sit back and take an extra long sip from a very tall glass of I told you so. No, but she gives Rand this Angreal, and I believe that she explains that this might have been in an earlier scene. She says, basically, when I was a novice at the White Tower, I was having a hard time channeling, and a Aes Sedai who I admired beat the crap out of me with the one power until I channeled to stop her. Basically beat her block out of her. And I don't know if Moraine has a block in her backstory. I almost think, from the way that they described that Aes Sedai, I almost think that they might be alluding to Cadsuane. Cadsuane shows up as Rand's advisor after Moraine has left his role as his Aes Sedai advisor. The pattern sort of spins Cadsuane to Rand after Moraine leaves the story for a while. Anyway, when she was talking about, a very powerful, very scary, she said, she was terrifying. and everyone's afraid of Cadsuane. So I think she might be talking about Cadsuane. And she tells Rand that all you have to do is go into the Eye of the World and defeat the Dark One, and here's an Angreal. And Rand's smiling. It's the first time he smiles in like 6 episodes. Because that's all I have to do. No problem. Nice to see these. There were some moments of levity in this final episode, and I would like to see more of that because there's plenty of humor in the Wheel of Time. It's a little understated in certain parts, but they're funny books, and everything doesn't need to be so fell and so dark and so cynical. Let's add a little bit of light and hope into this series. God knows we need it. Light knows we need it. Egwene and Nynaeve are listening to the wind, and as the Trollocs advance on Fal Dara, and I never picked this up before, but I read the first 5 chapters of the Wheel of Eye of the World the other day, just because I needed a refresher on the sort of the tone and style of the series. That I haven't read the books in a while. And one of the controversies in the early part of that book is that Nynaeve got the winter wrong. She said it was going to be a mild winter, and it turned out to be one of the worst winters in years. And so her job as Wisdom is to be able to predict the weather, and she used to be very good at predicting the weather. That's why they made her Wisdom when she was so young, but she completely got it wrong in the winter that the story begins in. And Senbu and some on the village council want to have her removed as wisdom because she can't listen to the wind. What she says to Egwene here was, I haven't been able to listen to the wind since I first channeled. Which Wilders learn how to channel on their own without any training from the White Tower. Nynaeve uses her herbs. What I think they're saying here is that when Nynaeve began to channel in earnest, she lost her ability to listen to the wind because it was only there to prevent her from hurting herself with the one power. But now that she's become too powerful for that crutch anymore. There probably is a deeper explanation somewhere in the books. But I thought I was glad that they brought this up because I had just read this chapter in The Eye of the World and I was like, oh, that's why she can't listen to the wind anymore. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The Trollocs are attacking Tarwin's Gap with Tarwin's Gap with a large army, and Shiniar is mobilizing. Like I said, I love the heraldry and the pageantry of this very real place in the Wheel of Time world. We spend a lot of time in Shiniar with the culture of Shiniar. And while from a real world battlefield perspective, I don't really think that this siege is fought the way it would be fought in a real world, even with wizards. However, I did enjoy the lines of battle and there's a lot of great, like I said, there are a lot of great montages. I love a good montage. The sort of the arming up of Fal Dara and the riding of the knights of Fal Dara, warriors of Fal Dara to Tarwin's Gap. Just beautiful, strong visuals that told the story of this very important location well. That being said, I still wasn't crazy about how Aljamar was portrayed. And like this scene when they're in the wall at Tarwin's Gap. So the warlord or the general of a army in pre-industrial times would be in one of two places. He would either be at the back of the army in a tent with a bunch of maps and a bunch of aides commanding the battle, or he would be leading the cavalry. Now, there are plenty of examples of generals fighting in melee combat with their armies. In some of the later battles of the Roman Civil War, both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, fought with, on foot with sword, shoulder to shoulder with the Roman legions. Alexander the Great fought in battle. He didn't lead from behind the lines, but Alexander the Great led the cavalry. And when you're commanding an army, you're giving orders the entire time. And it's not just, okay, you guys go fight there, you guys go fight there. You're also responsible for keeping the supplies running, for getting reports from the scouts about the enemy movements. So a general is always surrounded by lieutenants and by aides and by people who are giving him information, and he's giving them orders. And even when he might be leading a cavalry charge, he's still going to have retainers around him if he needs to send a message. My point is, he's not going to be standing on a battlement with a crossbow. Aljamar has more important shit to do than shoot arrows in this battle. And so that was a little bit of immersion breaking for me. Like I said, I wish we had seen a little bit more of the tactical genius of this character, this one of the 5 great captains of the Wheel of Time world, instead of more of the flawed, portrayal we got of this character. I was disappointed by that. It's probably the only thing that really disappointed me in the finale, in the last 2 episodes, besides how much angst there was between the Emansfield 5. We get to the Eye of the World, and this was the first time that I actually got chills. Because, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe that I've lived to see, wherever this series goes, whatever its successes or failures, the fact that I'm with Moiraine and Rand al'Thor at the Eye of the World, in the finale of the Eye of the World, means a lot. I love these books. I've spent a lot of time reading these books. They've been friends. These characters are my friends. I feel like I've lived in this world. So to be in the Blight, about to go down into the Eye of the World to face the Dark One, is just an amazing moment. And I'm grateful that I've gotten to see it. See it realized on the big screen. And this is exactly what Rand kneeling on one of the seal, what this is the seal of the Dark One's prison. In the book, I believe, The Eye of the World is a pool of untainted Saidan, the male half of the One Power. And Rand is able to touch the One Power without becoming tainted by it and defeat, I think, one of the Forsaken. I'm not sure which one. They fight 2 Forsaken. Then there's a green man, a Nym, that kills one of the Forsaken at the cost of his own life. Oh, also, during Rand's dream sequence, he stabbed himself in the gut to wake himself from the dream. He sheathed the sword, which is an important part of that Rand does a couple of times and somehow survives. I think the first time he sheathes the sword is at the end of the second novel, The Great Hunt. But he does it in this, and that, again, somebody has read these books who's writing this show, and I'm grateful for that. But this looks like what Rand kneeling on a seal to the Dark One's prison would look like. He goes into a dream sequence, and this is actually Egwene has this dream, or when she is being raised to accept the White Tower in the second book. One of the realities she goes into is her and Rand get married and have a daughter named Joya, and we meet little Joya in this scene. But it's all it's the Dark One, or it's Balazaman tempting Rand. Hey, you've got, if you just agree to serve me, you can make the one power, make the world in your image, make the world whatever you want. It's join me, and together we'll rule the galaxy sort of scene. But in the real world, Moiraine is ready to cut Rand's throat to stop him from turning to the Dark One, which is exactly what Moiraine would have done. And I skipped some. I'm jumping back and forth, unfortunately, and I'm trying to wrap this up because we're at about an hour. Because Ishamael stills Moiraine here, or we're led to believe there's a lot of disasters happen at the end of this episode. Moiraine gets stilled. Loial gets killed by Padan Fain. Nynaeve dies because the woman leading the Circle channeled too much of the One Power. That's a trick they do in a lot of these shows. Not everybody died that seems to have died. Moiraine is, oh my God, I've been stilled. Well, yeah, but there's somebody nearby who can heal stilling. Nynaeve seems like she dies, and then, oh no, at the end of the episode, she's still alive. She's okay. She was only mostly dead. And then Loial gets killed. Or at least stabbed in the chest by the ruby dagger, which should have killed him. But I somehow suspect that at the beginning of season 2, we're going to find out that Loial survived his injuries. Or maybe he's not. Maybe not. I mean, when you have a show like this with so many characters, you have characters to spare. So they can kill off Loial, and while he has some important stuff to do in later books, there's ways they can get around that in storytelling. And, it lets us know that the situation is serious. The stakes are high, that characters like Loial and Moiraine don't have plot armor that's going to prevent them from maybe, either getting stilled, or, which she doesn't get stilled in the books, or getting killed, like Loial doesn't get killed in the books. As long as it's handled correctly with respect for the source material, I think you can make changes. It's the general feel that you don't want to mess with. And while books that were written in the 80s and the 90s, there's going to be a different tone in 2021, almost 2022. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone, by the way. While I think they're still staying true to the source material. I mean, just look at this. This looks like what Ishamael channeling into Moiraine while Rand is unconscious in her lap, standing on top of the seal of the Dark One's prison. It looks as much of it as anything else I've ever seen, and I think if Robert Jordan were still with us, he would give visuals like this his blessing and say, yeah, that's kind of how I imagined this world looking. Just going through the last few scenes because we're getting to the end. And I am going to do another video on my thoughts on the season as a whole. But they go and dig out the horn of the servants or the warriors of Fal Dara dig out the horn of Valir. And for something that's such a secret, everyone seems to know. And they have no problem letting, oh, there's an Ogier. Well, who are you? You can't come in here. Oh, it's an Ogier? Okay, you're cool. Oh, it's some random peasant that we met yesterday? Okay, you're fine too. Yeah, this is where the Horn of Valir is, and we're getting it out for the dragon because the dragon needs it in the last battle. And the last battle's here, even though we don't really know if it's the last battle. None of the prophecies have been fulfilled, and we don't know if the dragons are here. We're going to get this secret, really powerful weapon out from its hiding place where I'm assuming it's been hidden for 3,000 years, just in case somebody shows up and needs it. And who shows up but Padan Fain, and he kills everybody. He kills Uno too, by the way. Uno doesn't die in the books. Padan Fain shows up and takes off with kills Loial, kills Uno, and the other Shinarian, and then takes off with the Horn of Valir, which sets us up for the adventure in the Great Hunt. So, not the neatest way of getting there, but we're there, and we can now move on with the story. Rand resists Balazamon's temptation, channels the little fat man Angreal, and seemingly defeats him. And right before he disappears, Balazamon, Ishamael, gives us a little grin. And signifying, and Moiraine says something similar. I don't think this was the last battle. I think this was the first battle. Rand leaves. And this is so big spoiler from the end of A Memory of Light. At the end of A Memory of Light, after the last battle has been fought, Rand has defeated the Dark One, has sealed the Dark One and back in his prison and defeated Ishamael. He's killed Ishamael, but the cost was his own body. And he switches bodies. And then sort of rides off into the sunset on his own. And only a few people know that Rand survived the last battle. The world thinks he's dead. And because his body has been killed, but his soul remains in the body of another. And that's how the series ends. So this episode ends with Rand defeating the Dark One, defeating Ishamael, I should say, and riding off on his own because he knows he's going to go mad and kills the people he wants, the people he loves. And he tells Moiraine not to tell the others what happened to him. So I just thought this episode ended more like A Memory of Light ends than The Eye of the World ends. And so I think they gave us a lot of what happens later in the books in this season. So for anybody who might be complaining about stuff that they left out, they put a lot of stuff in. And like I said, or in an earlier video, the one interview I did read with showrunner Rafe Judkins was that, they got us into deeper into some of these characters' arcs, like how Perrin's battle is eternal and how Mat flirts with the dark side, and Rand's sort of inner conflict with finding out he's the chosen one earlier than in the books. And I think that's important, especially for people who may be new to the Wheel of Time, to see the depth of these characters and this world and how many different aspects of it can be told over a long period of time. This is long-form storytelling at its best. So wrapping things up, and I'll get to the post-credit scene in a second. Thanks to Nynaeve and Egwene and the female channelers, Fal Dara has been saved, I'm sure at the cost of many lives. Rand has seemingly defeated the Dark One, although Moiraine seems to think there is more to come. Moraine's been stilled. Mat is apparently back at Shadar Logoth. I don't know what's going to happen there. That I was expecting, like I said in the previous video, a Han Solo moment where Mat showed up and saved the day at the end of the episode, but he didn't. He did not. Instead, he's back in Shadar Logoth. Now, that could mean a lot of different things. He is definitely still tainted by the Ruby Dagger, which in the books, they heal him temporarily and then they heal him permanently. So, and that actor's leaving the show. Mat's got important stuff to do in the next book. So it'll be interesting how they weave him back into the story. There's more to be told with Min. There's more to be told with Perrin. There's more to be told with Lan. There's a lot. They've set up a lot of things, and they've done a good job of covering, of mirroring what needed to happen in the Eye of the World and getting to the characters to the same place that they are to begin the Great Hunt, which is, in my opinion, when the series really begins. And while some characters are maybe in different places and are different takes than you might, or one fan might have preferred, or another fan might have preferred, I still feel like as a whole we're at a good stopping point. I felt like this was a suitably epic finale. There was a lot of big set pieces, a lot of action and adventure, had a lot of fun with it. I will talk more in the final video. I'm going to make one more video, as I said, for this season 1, and then talk about where the channel's going. But I'll talk about the season overall. That'll be a much shorter video. This video is clocking in at an hour and 20 minutes, and I promise not to do another hour and 20 minutes, at least until we get to the finale of season 2. I know I was all over the place in this video. There was a lot to cover. Thanks for sticking with us. Please like and subscribe. I'll do one more video, as I said, in the next couple of weeks and let you guys know what I'm going to do after that. Really appreciate the people who watch this channel for allowing me to ramble and rant about the Wheel of Time, which I really enjoy. I've enjoyed this series, and I am looking forward to making more videos. Until then, enjoy your holiday, and we will see you next time. And I'm just realizing that I forgot to talk about the post-credit scene with the Shanshan. Apologies for that. Again, I tried to get this video finished so I could get over to my mom's house for Christmas Eve. So I was kind of running out of time in the last 20 minutes of the voiceover to get this done and uploaded today. So the Shanshan show up, and they are scary, and they are alien, and they clearly have tormented slaves serving them as dame. We saw a couple of times in the first season the consequences of wielding the one power. Yes, it makes you strong, but it also makes you very vulnerable. And we will, I'm sure, see a lot more of these new antagonists in the second season. I would have liked to have maybe seen some of their creatures. They fly on, I think, Rockin', which are like, I believe they're like flying reptiles, so pterodactyls, dinosaurs. And they have, they have, I don't think it's Groms, but they have like troll-like monsters that serve their nobility, the blood. They used the portal stones to go to some of the other worlds and bring in creatures from some of the world and enslave them. They're very different culture than the cultures we've met so far. Very unique culture in fantasy. And they channeled the one power to create a tidal wave to kill a little girl. And I did notice that the little girl was in a white dress. I think it's meant to suggest Egwene, who is probably the first Aes Sedai or accepted Aes Sedai to encounter the Shanshan. So, expanding this world, setting us up for season 2. Anyway, wrap it up there. I will see you next time.